Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Mental Training Room. This is your host, Haley Herdman. I'm a former Division I basketball player and current mental health therapist.
And I am Naomi Yim, also a former Division I basketball player and a current real estate investor with a passion for athlete mental health.
Throughout our time as collegiate athletes, Naomi and I struggled with our emotional well-being, and we know from this experience how neglected the mental aspect of sports can be, which is why we created this podcast, to foster a safe space for other athletes to open up about their own experiences.
Whether you are an athlete, coach, parent, or anyone with an athlete in their circle, we hope you can gain some insight from our episodes.
Now, let's get into it. Welcome to the Mental Training Room. Hi, Tia. Welcome back to Mental Training
Hi,
Room.
Haley. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. For those of you who maybe didn't listen to our previous episode with Jenny, or as I referred to her, Tia, throughout the episode, Jenny is my aunt, and she is a huge mentor of mine in the clinical world and as a budding therapist. And I'm so excited to have her back on the Mental Training Room. So Tia, to start us off, what is something good that's happened to you recently or anything exciting that you're looking forward to right now?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. I love being here and talking about all things mental health and especially related to athletes. And I would say something good that has happened to me recently is just this past weekend, I competed in the sport that I'm obsessed with, as you know, pickleball. Played a tournament at our club, the Tennis and Pickleball Club in Newport Beach, or it's called TTC. It was a tournament put on by APS Pickleball. And on Saturday, I got a bronze medal in women's doubles. So I felt really good about that. Played 4.0 level. My goal is to get to 4.5, but you got to kind of work your way up. But I felt really good about that for sure.
Good.
And so something that I'm looking forward to, so without going into detail in it, but you know that I've had a lot of health issues over the last year, and kind of my physical stamina kind of took a hit. And so one of the things I'm really looking forward to is I'm kind of on this journey to get back to feeling strong, feeling healthy, just feeling good overall. So I'm looking forward to that process.
Amazing. Well, we all know how important that is, especially with, I mean, even if you weren't playing pickleball, just going through day-to-day life, not feeling your best is always hard. So being able to get back to that point where you feel like you're strong enough and you have that energy, but also for pickleball, because I know that what you were going through kind of took you out of the game for a little bit, and that's always really sad. No one likes to be taken out of their sport. And I just love to see how much joy pickleball brings you. Elite athletes know performance isn't just about what you do in the game. It's about how you prepare and how you recover. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Defend USA. If you want to stay in peak shape, you can't afford to ignore the power of recovery. That's where Defend USA comes in. Trusted by the NBA, WNBA, MLB, NCAA, and beyond, Defend USA's compression gear is designed to help you train harder, recover faster, and perform at your best. Their military-grade compression technology boosts circulation, reduces muscle fatigue, and helps prevent injury, so you can push limits without breaking down. That's why the best athletes don't just train hard, they recover smarter. Level up your recovery, level up your game. Check out Defend USA at dfndusa.com and at dfndusa on Instagram, and get the gear trusted by the pros. Because true champions don't just train hard, they recover harder. Well, I'm sure we could probably do a whole episode about pickleball, but that is not why we're here today. So one of the biggest things that I feel like has helped me in my just maturing, I feel like, with my emotions, the emotional maturity of it all is having psychoeducation and getting that through grad school, and how much grad school was almost like therapy in and of itself. Just the amount of things your eyes are open to, whether it's like the internal processes or the way to just view problems that you're going through, or you're learning the skills to teach clients, but sometimes that might be the first time you as an individual are also learning those skills. So being able to implement those into my life as well. And one of the things that I found most interesting, and I had a lot of background with it because working for you and helping and learning from you, is DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And there are so many components to DBT that once I started to study them and become aware of them, realized that if this was a concept that athletes were introduced to at a younger age, or even any point of their career, can help them so much, being able to identify certain behaviors with technical terms and actual processes that are happening within them when they feel this heightened emotional state or whatever it might be. So that is why Tia is here today, is to give us a little lesson on DBT and how athletes can implement DBT into their own practices, whether it's on the court, off the court, or even in life in general, because there's so many skills within this that are super helpful. So before we get into anything more about that, can you just give us a little bit of background as to what DBT actually is?
Sure, I'd love to. So I was trained in DBT several years ago when I was working for Kaiser Permanente, and just instantly I was like, this makes perfect sense. This really conceptualizes, why people struggle if we don't have the skills in these areas, and how to help people navigate life more successfully with less difficulty, less pain, less challenges in their relationships. So I love it. And DBT, as you said, it's dialectical behavioral therapy. It was designed by Marsha Linehan, who herself was struggling to find a type of therapy that could really help her symptomatology and help her kind of manage life better. It's just phenomenal. It's genius. It's focused on understanding that we have this need to accept where we are now, accept where you're at in life, what your skills are, how you got those skills, which is largely based on how you were raised and your life experiences and your family history. And also, while accepting the change, or the accepting where you're at now, working towards change. We always grow. Every single second of every day, we're growing and changing. So it's really kind of focused on these two concepts, and the skills come in when we're talking about change. So that's the part where DBT is just, it's filled with skills that are practical, that are applicable, that are easy to understand, that through practice and repetition, we can incorporate them into our lifestyle. And the skills are broken down into 4 different modules or 4 different categories. The first one would be mindfulness, which really is kind of the deeper levels of understanding yourself, knowing yourself, understanding what your reactions are to certain situations and why you have those reactions. It's really gaining deep self-awareness, because any change has to start with self-awareness. Then there's interpersonal effectiveness is the second one, which is basically like communication skills. There we really focus on how to communicate through using self-respect and respect of others, so that we're not just constantly going straight into a conflict when we're trying to, share our feelings or thoughts. And then we're also not just shutting down. The third module is distress tolerance. So what do we do with these big emotions that we feel without making things worse? We really want to learn to tolerate them and then know how to self-soothe, because we don't want to take actions or do things in a heightened emotional state, because we'll usually make the situation worse. And then the fourth is emotion regulating. So truly learning to understand your different emotions. They're all necessary. How to navigate them, how to regulate your emotions, when to regulate your emotions. I mean, these skills to me are so important for everybody to practice, that even though DBT was originally designed for people who really struggle with self-harm, relationships, keeping jobs, just like daily functioning, kind of known as the type of treatment that's best for people with borderline personality disorder. But in my opinion, we can all benefit from knowing these skills and building our skills base. I think this stuff should be taught in school curriculum to everyone growing up. We all need this.
Yeah, it really should. And I think even for people who might not, obviously, I'm aware of how DBT, how it's mainly or maybe was originated for people with a diagnosis of a borderline personality disorder, any type of personality disorders. But for people who might not have even had that background knowledge, just everything that you said before that is they just sound like basic human skills. So going back to your point of it,
Totally.
yeah, it should be taught in schools. It should be something that we are more aware of. And especially with athletes, I think you checked a box for, or any athlete who's listening can relate to any part of that you just said with the emotional regulation, the distress tolerance. I mean, there is so much, we say it all the time in here, but collegiate athletics, professional athletics, whatever it is, there is so much emotion involved, so much stress involved. And I feel like a lot of the times, maybe now it's becoming a little bit more outdated, which is great, but it's just like put your head down and work. When that, we know that that's not effective for athletes or for humans in general in any part of life. And I think one of the things so a big thing that I want to get into is then the different parts of the mindfulness, but we can get into that into a little bit. But one of the biggest things in what you just described of like the 4 pillars of DBT was the interpersonal effectiveness. And I think that's so important for talking about athletes and sports in general, so important for team dynamics and just player relationships. That is something where like light bulbs kind of go off in my head because they're a lot about life. And obviously we talk about sports on this podcast. So a lot about sports is knowing how to navigate relationships, whether it's a relationship with your coach, with the athletic director, with your athletic trainer, with your teammates, whatever it is you're surrounded
with yourself.
With yourself, yes, 100%. Like you're surrounded by people 24/7. And if you don't have those skills, it's really hard to have the relationship health part of it all.
Right.
So that was something that really stuck out to me when going over these 4 pillars of DBT. But on that, I think is super applicable to athletes and one that I want to help athletes become more aware about is the different components of mindfulness. So there's 3 minds and I'll kind of go over it a little bit and then, want your insight on that after. But there's our reasonable mind, our emotional mind, and our wise mind. And I think they're pretty self-explanatory, of the titles and what they're called and what they kind of are responsible for. But the reasonable mind is that more logical or rational, fact-driven mind. Emotional mind, obviously, is when emotions dominate our thinking. And then the wise mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be the ideal mind that we would want to kind of act within most of the time in our life. And that's an integration of both. So kind of having that balance and accepting the duality of the reasonable and the emotional mind. How do you think when it comes to athletes and when it comes to being in those high pressure environments, how do you think being aware of these 3 parts of mindfulness can help an athlete reach their full potential?
Definitely. Yeah, that was a good description. I kind of like to refer to it because a lot of times people feel like, they have this conflict going on in their head. They have one part of their brain that's saying this, another part that's saying this, or you hear people say like the devil and the angel on their shoulder, just this constant 2 voices in your head that are arguing and opposing. And so I will say to people, that's your emotion mind and your reason mind, right? And this is where the conflict comes in because your emotion mind wants to avoid pain and do what's going to make us feel best. And your logic mind is largely fact driven. So for the athlete, it's going to be whatever the programming is. We have to win. We have to beat this team. I have to play my best. Like the information that we're getting from the outside is fact on what we have to do for the athlete is going to put a lot of pressure on him. And then you have your emotion mind. Am I good enough? Am I fast enough? Am I strong enough? there's people better than me. And so this battle going back and forth is what causes people a lot of distress. It's not two different voices. It's actually two necessary parts of your brain that one feels and one looks at fact. And so they're going to be in opposition sometimes. And the goal would be to let your wise mind kind of be the director, the driver, the mediator. The decisions and actions come from the wise mind, where we're kind of like looking at the emotion involved, validating it, acknowledging it. It might be scary. There might be failure. There might be pain. But if we go based on what seems to make the most sense, I think we're going to be okay. Therefore, wise mind says do this. And a lot of times it's your gut reaction. It's your gut reaction to a situation, but then we end up talking ourselves out of that gut reaction. Like if the gut reaction is like, I just need to talk to my coach about A, B, or C. That's probably the right thing that needs to happen. But then maybe we talk ourselves out of it because we're like, why would I, or how would I say it? And they're just going to be upset, or they're not going to listen to me, or I'm going to sound selfish or whatever. And we talk ourselves out of it. That's where the interpersonal effectiveness skills come in, is the building the communication through, practicing self-respect and respect of others. But we usually talk ourselves out of what wise mind is saying is the right thing to do.
That's really interesting, because would you say that so wise mind, you're saying, is the gut like reaction of it all?
Usually
Okay.
it's your initial response is I need
Okay.
to do this, and then we talk ourselves out of it.
Yeah. And then we get into like the overthinking, where that maybe the wise mind becomes then more split, and it's like that the emotional or the logical, without combining the two in. Okay, so that's really interesting. And I feel like the reason why this spoke to me a lot was because, as you know, which I don't think a lot of people, even like my teammates in college, realize how much of an emotional player I was before college. And like talking about getting technicals, like got kicked out of a game one time, like just obviously had no idea anything about DBT or any inner workings, really. So I didn't have any mental training in depth that I do now, as I did when I was competing, maybe at like my highest, because since I didn't play that much in college, I didn't really have a chance to implement any mental skills training that I had like in a game situation, more so obviously with practice.
Right.
Dealing with the things off the court, but I wasn't competing for game situations in college like I was in high school or before that. But I was such an emotional player. So that's why I think that this topic really spoke to me, because you see a lot of the times watching, and even watching games now of on the TV in person, or even watching like my little brother play, you see how the emotion can really take you out of the present. And fogs your brain, it clogs your thinking, and you can't really see what's going on. You can only see and feel what you're thinking in your mind, and that's the emotion, and they're very intense.
Yeah.
What are some ways that we can help athletes become aware of that when it is in the moment, and any skills that can help them be able to kind of separate the minds and really hone into the wise mind when it matters most?
Well, I love how you mentioned earlier that the concept of mindfulness and the three minds, emotion mind, reason mind, wise mind, was something that you felt we could really hone in on for an athlete. But as you were just talking, I don't know if you realized it, but you just touched on distress tolerance, emotion regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. So actually, all of the skills in these different modules can help the athlete tremendously, right? Because we need to be able to regulate our emotions. One of the things, some of the feedback that I've gotten, like on the pickleball court, one of the positives, I guess, that I get feedback for a lot from different players is that they like playing with me because I'm calm, because I'm stable. I'm not like up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
And typically those types of players in our club aren't the fun ones to play with. And so that's something that I think is very important. And if you look at some of our top athletes across all sports, they are able to kind of keep that composure, stay somewhat stable. Now, in a situation where it's healthy, because sometimes we go numb and it looks like we're stable, but we're not.
Right.
But in a situation where it's healthy, you've got good emotion regulation skills. You've got the ability to kind of like stay in a neutral position so that you can focus, because the minute you introduce emotions into it, now you're going to get distracted. And so you're not going to be able to focus and be present and perform how you need to perform, right? So, and then you also mentioned, wait, I don't know if you mentioned it or if I was just thinking it, but like the stress of, like game points or,
Right.
1 minute left on the clock. Our brain could easily take us down worst case scenario. And so that's where we have to be able to tolerate the stress, right? And so that module is really important too, in tolerating the stress, like the high pressure that athletes face in competition.
Yeah.
I told you I was going to use one example, but I have a different one coming to mind. But like on Saturday in the women's doubles, our first game, we were down 0-9 and we were
Oh,
playing
wow.
to 15. Okay. And it
Okay.
was our first game of the day. We had warmed up for like an hour and, we just looked at each other and we were like, okay, we're not playing our game. Let's like play our game, like just relax and play our game. We came
Yeah.
back and we won 15-14. It was it
Way.
was win by one. And it was just
Wow.
an example of, because I could feel my mindset originally going, oh my gosh, they're better than us. They're going to beat us. Maybe I'm in the wrong division, and just really questioning myself. So that was emotion mind kind of wanting to pull me out of the sport, out of the game, out of the moment. And then I started feeling stress, right? So with my awareness, because obviously I've been using this stuff for a long time, so I practice it, I incorporate it into my life. So with my awareness, I had to kind of reset, and you switch sides at 8 and you get like a 15-second timeout. And that was where I was just like, okay, this is not me. This is not my game. What's going on? Doing like a self inventory, take a deep breath, focus. My reset is always me and the ball. That's it. No, nothing else exists. I get so focused in on that ball and watching it wherever it goes on the court. There's no one else there but me and the ball.
Yeah.
So that's mindfulness. So I tolerated the stress of the situation, I regulated the emotion, and then got into focus mode, being in the present moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so much sense. And I think it's bringing me back to something that you said right at the beginning of the episode of these are all skills that are things that can be practiced, and they're more kind of tangible skills, I would say. And I think that resonates a lot with athletes because we want to see the results. And sometimes with the mental side of things, like just how we are advocating, like you can't see mental injuries. That's not something that you can see. So it might not seem real. So a lot of the times with these psychological skills, athletes might feel like they're not working because there's no tangible things, but being able to put everything into practice and realizing that it is just like if you're learning a new weight, like if you're learning a new form of weightlifting, you're not going to get it on the first try. You're not going to hit your max PR on the first try. So being able to work on that whatever type of lift it is every day in the weight room, approaching DBT skills with the same mindset that you would learning a new lift, and being able to, like you said, you have a lot of practice with this. So it was easy for you to implement it into that game over the weekend because you know what it feels like. And I think that's a huge message too of sharing with athletes is this is something that you have to put time into. You don't necessarily have to see it. Like you can get your resources. You can go to therapists, mental performance coaches, whatever it is, and kind of have them help you become aware of it. But it's going to be up to you to put in that work off of the court, off of the field, off of whatever it is, because it's not going to just be, oh, it's a game time situation. I can practice this one time and it's going to work. The work is done when nobody's watching.
The court. So you're right. Like you will not be able to walk into a game tomorrow and be able to apply these skills if you've never tried them before. And a lot of times I do have clients, kind of say, I tried that once and it didn't work. And like you said, the example that I use is if you wanted to go run a marathon, would you be able to go out tomorrow and do it?
Right.
No, it's going to take at least 6 months of training, at least,
Yeah.
especially if you've never run before, right?
Right.
So these skills need to be practiced every single day or as much as possible to be able to call on them at a time where you really need them, whether it's during an argument with a parent, an argument with a spouse, a high stress day at work, a high stress school day, or on the court. None of this is, or the field, whatever your sport,
Yeah.
but none of this is going to work if you're not getting familiar with it and practicing it. Like most athletes, I mean, I have a routine that I go through before a game or before a tournament. Those kinds of things are important too. But ultimately, let's just talk with mindfulness, because I always start with building that skill first. Any sort of change requires awareness first.
Yes.
Right. So one of the things that I challenge people to do, and I was just working with a high school athlete the other day that is overwhelmed, volleyball player, overwhelmed with schoolwork, with college applications, with practices, club volleyball and school volleyball, just full schedule, also trying to have a social life, homework, all that stuff. And, we were going through kind of her daily routine and daily schedule because she was like, there's no room at all in my schedule to add practicing anything. And so I was like, okay, I think we can find, some spaces. As she was talking, she didn't realize she said it, but I was like, light bulb, I found a space. She's like, yeah, I'm usually figuring out what I'm wearing for the day and what I'm going to eat for the day while I'm brushing my teeth. And so I challenged her. I said, over the next week until I see you again, what I want you to do is while you're brushing your teeth, go through your five senses. So for the 2 minutes, 90 seconds, whatever it is that you're brushing your teeth, what do I see? And then look in the mirror and kind of focus on getting every tooth. What do I smell? And focus on the smell of the toothpaste. What do I hear? What do I taste? And what do I feel? And done. You're done. You've practiced mindfulness and being in the present moment for the day. I said you could do it while you're showering, which is a nice one. You could put a reminder in your phone at noon for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Practice deep breathing. Focus on the inhale, pause, exhale. All of these are ways of building mindfulness.
This episode is sponsored by PhysioWorks Physical Therapy. Sports aren't just about skill, it's about strength. And I'm not just talking about physical strength. Athletes train their bodies, push their limits, and build muscle to perform at their best. But what happens when injury strikes, or when movement just doesn't feel right? That's where PhysioWorks Physical Therapy comes in. PhysioWorks isn't just about recovery, it's about unlocking your full potential. Their expert team helps you rebuild strength, improve mobility, and prevent future injuries so you can get back to doing what you love. Because strong muscles create strong athletes. At PhysioWorks Physical Therapy in Redondo Beach, California, they understand that true performance is both physical and mental. Because a strong body fuels a strong mind, and when both are in sync, that's when you truly win. Yeah, what you just said about not feeling like you have time to do it is such a relatable feeling for a lot of athletes, especially young athletes, when it's like you might not really feel in control of your schedule because, your coaches are telling you have to be here, your teacher's telling you this, your parents are expecting this. And remember last episode, you shared with us a couple of years ago, and I don't think we even labeled it really as mindfulness at the time, but when you're walking to classes as a collegiate athlete, being able to take in your surroundings during that time. And that's something I did not do. I always remember I was just on my phone walking. I was anxious, I was whatever, but really using that time to practice mindfulness. And another time that came to mind for me when you're saying this is if you are a high school athlete and you're not driving yet, the time that you spend in the car, because I remember I had to drive to like Long Beach, to Gardena, to these places. They're not that they're that far, but during the time that we were driving was rush hour on the 405, so it would take a long time. Using that time to practice mindfulness. If you're doing your homework in the car or if you're taking a nap, whatever it is, just being able to implement maybe the 10 minutes of mindfulness and doing it because it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you carve out time for, because correct me if I'm wrong, but mindfulness would be something we want to be able to implement into anything and everything that we do.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So anything and everything that you're doing, you could pause and try to really be in the present moment. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to do a check-in either with one sense, like what do I see? And you look at everything around you, sizes, shapes, colors, shadows, texture, all that stuff for a minute. You've practiced it, or go through all five. Like it's a great one to do.
Yeah. And then where my mind goes to is how that translates to, and then obviously using it in your sport practices too, like using that time to practice the mindfulness, because that obviously is the most similar that you would be to a game situation. And if you're implementing it within practice, which is why I also think it's super important for coaches to be aware of this stuff too, because you can allow that space and create that space for your athletes to practice it in practice times, but using your own practices of the sport or trainings, personal trainings, whatever it is, to practice mindfulness as well. But then how this translate, and it's where my mind is going to, into a game situation, like you just said, in your pickleball game or match. Is it game or matches for pickleball?
It's a match. It's usually 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 5 is the match, but then you
Okay.
play the games.
The game, right. Okay. But then feeling comfortable to implement it into those kind of game winning situations. And where my mind is going to is I remember feeling, and I actually, okay, this is kind of an example. I, again, did not play a lot in college. And I remember my sophomore year, I think it was, our best player, Jasmine Jones, shout out to my teammate, love her, but she got fouled on a shot or something like that, but then had to be taken out of the game. And my coach subbed me in, like, I don't know, not sure what was going through her mind, but subbed me in, and I had to shoot the 2 free throws. And it was like it was maybe third quarter, deep into the game. I'm so cold. Like, obviously there's that rating that's saying like, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Like, yes, but also let's like make a smart coaching decision. But puts me in, I shoot the 2 free throws and missed them. And then my coach runs a play for me and I missed the shot. And then I got taken out after that. The only thing I remember is how extremely nervous I felt, because there is that saying, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. But when you're not playing consistently for every game, it's kind of like, okay, this is my role on the team. I was focused on being able to energize them, being like a player's coach. So I definitely did not feel mentally prepared. And all I remember really thinking is like, don't miss the shot. And I'm looking at the backboard, I'm hearing everyone else's like screaming and what my teammates are saying to me, which were all great things. But my emotion mind was extremely heightened at that time. And I couldn't focus. Yep. There was no way I could focus on making the shot because all I was focused on is my emotion mind. Whereas if I were to have been aware of these skills and being able to implement them, you can then better connect with the intention of what you're trying to do in that game. I really liked how you said you connected with you and the ball and nothing else mattered. Like, I can just imagine how if I had that, you're looking at the ball, you're feeling the ball, you're one with the ball, you're looking at the rim and you're imagining that ball going in the rim. And just even saying it relieves the emotions that I feel talking about that moment, because it was so scary for me.
Right.
Then going back and being able to implement that, like through that perspective, immediately eases the emotion mind.
That's how you exactly. And that's how you tune out everything around you, is because you're focusing on the ball. Like, my serve is fairly consistent. It's not super strong or super fancy, but it is accurate and I can place the ball where I want to place it. But one of the things that makes my serve unique is, so once you say the score in pickleball, you have 10 seconds after you've said the score to serve. Oh, okay. I take the full 10 seconds.
Yeah.
I stand there, I've got the ball and the paddle. And in a tournament, it works great. It like annoys people. Then they're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Like they're on edge about what's going on. And all I'm doing is I take a big, long, deep breath and I say one positive affirmation and then I serve. Yeah. And it's crazy sometimes how many points we get off of my serve, because it's not a fancy serve. I'm just super focused, super consistent, super present. That's my time where I'm in control for those 10 seconds on the court. So I try to build myself up and I take a deep breath, relax my body, and do the positive affirmation. You
Right.
know, that's the same kind of thing you could do at the free throw line.
Yeah, and PKs or whatever it is. I think the affirmation is a really important part too, because you hear breathe and take your time on the free throw line, on the PK line, whatever it is. But sometimes, at least for me, I know that I didn't really have an affirmation or something
Mm-hmm.
to have that foundation. And it's really about what you're flooding your mind with at that time. Because if it's kind of like a blank
Mm-hmm.
space, like a dark abyss in your mind, then that'll throw you off. But being able to say a word, or even I remember in high school, I would always draw a star on my hand. And kind of like you said, the reset earlier when we were talking about you kind of have a reset, using that as a reset or as an affirmation too, because what the star represented to me was like, I'm a star. It helped me bring out my confidence,
Yeah.
me remember, the positive parts about my game. So I think that's important for athletes to develop too. It's kind of having that practice or having a routine or an affirmation that they can repeat to themselves. And even if you're comfortable with sharing that with your teammates so that if they see you kind of in getting a little internal, they can share that affirmation with you too. Because sometimes it helps to hear it from other people as well
Yeah.
as giving it to yourself. And so you bring up a really good point with that, the affirmation of it all and taking that time for yourself. And I think that also, I mean, does it for you? Does it slow down the game a little bit more for you too?
Absolutely. It absolutely does because we all have the ability to talk negatively to ourselves. It actually comes pretty natural. We either internalize things, messages that we've gotten about ourselves growing up, or things that we've heard growing up. We kind of internalize it and it's programmed in. But we tend to be very hard on ourselves. Our brain it's pulled towards the negative. We have a negative bias that's been passed down through history. So it's a little bit more work to get yourself to think positive, but it's worth it in the sense of you're going to perform worse in anything you do, even if it's a relationship, if you give in and believe the negative voice in your head, which is probably coming from emotion mind, not coming from fact.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to just kind of like, okay, emotion mind, I feel you, I see you, I hear you, but right
Yeah.
now we're going to focus on, I am a good player. I know I can make this shot. I know I can do this. I deserve this. I work hard. Whatever it is, just say that affirmation, then go.
Right. And I think a part of that too is learning that the self-talk doesn't even necessarily have to be positive. I mean, obviously positive is the goal, but sometimes even just adapting a
Accurate.
accurate, neutral, and kind of, I guess, going into the reasonable mind of like the fact driven of like, okay, yes, I had a turnover or yes, I missed a serve, but that doesn't mean I'm a bad player because
Exactly.
the serve before that or the shot before that you made. So why are we just focusing on that one negative part of the game?
Why are we generalizing?
Yeah. And so using the wise mind to, again, create the duality of the emotions and the logic and creating that, whether it's positive or neutral or non-judgmental view of ourselves and
Mm.
game. And I think that's a huge thing for athletes to realize too, because sometimes it really is hard to believe like, like if you're telling yourself like, I'm the best player, like maybe that's not true, but that doesn't mean that you can't have an important role on the team or that you don't bring value or something like that. So that's something that I
Absolutely.
always like to share in that too. Like we don't have to go down the like toxic positivity route either.
Right, right. Absolutely. No, I like that, Haley. You're right on with that. It's important you don't have to be overly positive. It's important to be realistic, like you said, and like I was saying earlier, in the past few months, as I'm trying to build my stamina back, I've caught myself just kind of going like, my gosh, why are you playing so bad? And then I'd have to that's emotion mind, and then I'd kind of have to, okay, hold on. You've been through a lot. Your body, went through a lot of stuff. You've got to rebuild. It's okay. Be kind, be patient, don't be perfect. Don't expect that you're going to play how you did a year ago, but you can get back there. And so it's being realistic is what's important.
Yeah. That. Well, all of this was so helpful. And I, again, wish I had this insight while I was competing, but I feel so grateful to have it now and to be able to pass it on to other people and hopefully open their eyes to this insight and this information and helping them strive for excellence in their sport mentally and physically. Before we end it, I want to ask you what I know. So your background in sports is you played volleyball when you were younger and now an avid and talented pickleball player. If there was anything that you could go back to, whether it was your younger self playing volleyball in sports or now with pickleball, what is the biggest message that you would want to tell yourself or continue to tell yourself through your athletic career when it comes to the mental side?
To be kind to myself and to be patient, and it's all a process, and there's no such thing as perfection, and the world just keep moving. I mean, at some point it's all going to work out. Some point you're going to stop that sport. At some point something else in your life is going to take over as it should as your main priority. So I would say the most important thing would be to be kind to yourself.
Beautiful. Very, very wise word. Well, thank you, Tia. I love you so much.
Love you too.
And that's a wrap for today's session in the mental training room. If you found value in this episode, make sure to subscribe to our show, share it with a teammate, friend, parent, or anyone you think would benefit from listening, and follow us on Instagram at mtr.pod.
We'll catch you next time inside the mental training room. If you are currently experiencing a mental health crisis, please dial 988 for emergency support.